Hello and welcome to the Lift Up Journeys podcast. My name is Katie and I'm one of the founding members of Lift Up Women in Life Sciences, a community created to connect, champion and inspire women from academia through to C-suite across the life sciences industry. I'm looking forward to sharing with you an inspiring collection of career stories from a group of wonderful women who work in leadership positions across the life sciences industry. I hope by listening to these stories, you will feel inspired in your own career and gain the skills, confidence, and knowledge you need to climb the career ladder and break through the glass ceiling. Thank you, and welcome back to another episode of Lift Up Journeys. Today, I'm joined by a wonderful guest, Sarena Lin. Sarena is a global C-level executive with a strong track record in driving transformational growth across global markets, leading successful global commercial, organisational and people transformation programs in the life sciences and the industrial sectors. Sarena holds an MBA in strategy from the Yale School of Management, an MA in international relations from Yale University, and a BA in computer science from Harvard University. Sarena grew up in Taiwan and the US. She's fluent in Mandarin Chinese and English and has basic knowledge of German too. She has her husband with one teenage daughter, and they currently reside in Germany. Sarena served as one of 6 members of the board of management of Bayer in Germany from 2021 to 2023 as the Chief Transformation and Talent Officer, where she led the development of a large-scale, people-centric global transformation program. She also restructured and redesigned the HR organization to be talent and leadership-centric, technology-enabled, and future-ready too. But prior to Bayer, Sarena was with Elanco Animal Health as president of Elanco's $1.5 billion business, as well as overseeing corporate strategy and global marketing. Sarena has also led the strategy development as well as the subsequent transformation and integration with Bayer Animal Health, which was a $7.6 billion acquisition. Prior to Elanco, though, Sarena was president of Cargill's $6 billion global compound animal feed and nutrition business, where she actually led more than 11,000 employees and 250 manufacturing plants across nearly 30 countries. But prior to Cargill, Sarena was a partner with McKinsey Company in New York and Taipei earlier in her career, where she worked in sales and shelf technology management at Procter & Gamble in San Francisco. Sarena is now a non-executive director on the supervisory board of Siemens Healthineers and serves on the compensation and third-party transaction committees. But externally, she's recognised as a critical thought leader on topics of leadership, transformation, diversity, equity and inclusion, and the future of talent. So it's a real pleasure to have you here with us today, Sarena. That's quite an introduction, isn't it?
Well, thank you, Katie. Thank you for reading through my bio. I really appreciate it. Well, it's great to be here. Thanks for
It's
having
great
me.
to have you on board to share your career journey with us today. It's always really lovely to hear where your career started, Sarena, particularly because you've worked your way right through to the C-level and onto the board. So would love to maybe hear from you where things started for you. So maybe did it start in school? Did you have a passion for particular topics?
Yeah, no, frankly, I think probably my passion started fairly late. I think when I first started in school, it's very much about how do I find things that sort of challenges me and interests me, and that's why I chose computer science because I find the discipline to be, it's intellectually challenging, it's problem solving, it's fun. But really, I think in terms of career, the thought about career development really didn't start until I joined McKinsey after business school, where I think, throughout my McKinsey career, I realized that in addition to self-development, self-growth, it's also about learning the environment. It's about learning the industry and eventually finding out what you stand for and how you contribute to what you do. And I think that's probably, in my mind, that's probably the critical part about developing one's career. Right? It is it's a passion meets professionalism, right? And knowing what that intersection looks like, so that you know what is the most value you can bring to the table. So I would say McKinsey really is probably the place that shaped my thinking in terms of how do I continue to develop so that I can continue to be valuable and be able to contribute while learning and having fun at the same time.
And I think it's a really important point to share, isn't it? That your passion for something doesn't have to come straight from being in school. You don't have to kind of be in school, be in academia, and have one area that you really want to pursue your career in. I think it's through trying things that challenge you. And as you said, once you're put in a different scenario, there's different things where you start to learn that there is a crossover between the professional and the real passion, isn't there?
I think it's very well said, Katie, because I know that we always ask ourselves and we ask our kids, what are you passionate about? What do you want to do in the future? Sometimes I actually think passion is developed the other way around. When you do something repeatedly, when you do something by putting effort into it, and when you become very good at it, you automatically develop the passion, right? And for me, perhaps, I was at McKinsey for about 13 years, and and so what I call the passion for problem solving probably came from that, right? Once you've done it repeatedly, you got a hang of it. You know what it's like. It becomes easier. And not only becomes easier, it becomes more enjoyable. And that's where passion gets developed. So I completely agree with you.
Absolutely. And obviously you spent some time in business school. You were at Yale, weren't you? Tell us about your experience of being at Yale.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. I think Yale is one of those environments where the business school is smaller compared to some of the larger business schools. The first year was pass-fail, which was quite interesting because one of the philosophy for Yale School of Management is to say, part of the opportunity for being in business school is learn to collaborate, learn to develop teamwork, learn to work with each other. So instead of focusing on grades, it really is focusing on teamwork. So it takes the pressure off you, but more importantly, it gives you sort of the opportunity to experiment, right? What does it mean to be working in a team? To really get to know your classmates. And I think that's probably where, having some of the most diverse conversations happen, right? So I think that's shaped a lot of that as well. And not to mention, I think the network that you continue to build long after school.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the network is always something that's so important no matter what you go into, because everyone has their own key areas of strength and the own areas that people can come together. So having a network that you can rely on, it should start at academia, shouldn't it? It should start where you keep in touch with your classmates and people who've been on a similar journey to you. So that's a really lovely point to share. How did you find the opportunity at McKinsey? Because that was obviously your first role once you'd officially left academia. How did you find that opportunity?
Yeah, and the truth is, when I joined McKinsey, like many people who join consulting firms right after business school, it's almost a bit of a default choice, isn't it? And when I joined, my mindset was, I'm going to be in this, I'm going to join McKinsey for 2 years until I figure out what I'm going to do when I really grow up. And it was probably true because McKinsey, like many other consulting firms, offer some really unique learning opportunities, right? Not only you hone your business skills, but you also get the opportunity, at least when I was at McKinsey at the time, to really work on many different companies or different industries where you see the differences, but yet also identifying the similarities in terms of business management. So you learn to connect the dots very quickly. You learn and you hone in your analytical skills. And yes, the work is tough. Yes, the life is tough. But the sort of intellectual challenge and working with some of the smartest people is absolutely just a tremendous experience, right? It was not easy. And, I absolutely suffered imposter syndrome the first year I was at McKinsey. I always thought that one day they're going to quickly come to tell me and say, Sarena, you don't belong here because you're not smart enough. And yet I survived. I was at McKinsey for 13 years and I became partner. I ended up running McKinsey's Taipei office. But I think it goes to say, I think when you start a journey, there's all sorts of doubt. It may not be for you. You might think that you fit. But I think ultimately, each of these becomes learning experiences in it to not only figure out who you are, what you're good at, but also recognizing that you're in an environment that hopefully is not only supportive and tolerate you, but really want you to develop and grow. So you could truly use the environment to help you with that and become better than who you are. And I think that's what McKinsey gave me.
Absolutely. And did you join in the New York team? Because obviously you'd spent time with New York and then ended up being the partner in Taipei. So what did that move look
Okay.
like?
Yeah, and I know I started in New York was because my husband, who was my fiance at the time, started in New York. So it was truly for family reasons. I eventually moved to McKinsey Taipei because McKinsey found out that I was actually originally from Taiwan, and Taipei is one of the the fast growing markets from a consulting perspective. So that's how I end up moving back to Taiwan. On top of it, I have a computer science background, and many of the clients in Taiwan are technology
Oh,
clients.
wow. Okay.
So there's a very nice fit in terms of both my background as well as my academic learning, and that's how I end up being there.
Absolutely. And what a move that must have been for you as well. How long were you there in Taipei for?
I was in Taipei for 7 years with
Wow.
McKinsey. I think it's great to be back home. My parents are still there, so it's great to be back home to be closer to them. But I think it goes back to, a bit of a learning. The truth is, I left Taiwan as a teenager. So when I went back to Taiwan as a professional manager, I realized I have to actually learn the business vocabulary because I operated in an American English
Of
setting.
course.
I went to business school in the US. I mean, the simplest things of how do you actually say revenue and profit and loss in Chinese, right?
Yes.
It's so you actually have to relearn it, and I think that's part of the fun thing about sort of connecting your personal heritage, but also in a professional setting. But you quickly, obviously get into the environment and realize that there's a lot there that not only you can learn but get excited about.
Absolutely, yeah. And it's tying something that you can be passionate about, isn't it, into your professional life. And it must have been amazing to be able to go back there, but also learn, right? Because business language is totally different country to country. And it's great
Absolutely.
to hear it was something that you were able to cover. So did you finish your time with McKinsey being in Taipei, and that's when you then chose to move on?
I actually, no, I actually moved back to McKinsey, New
Yeah.
York when our daughter was born. And then I stayed in McKinsey, New York for another about 2.5, 3 years or so until I got this opportunity to join Cargill. That's when I
Oh,
left.
fantastic. And tell us all about Cargill's. What opportunity did that give you for that point in your career?
Yeah, I think Cargill, I first joined Cargill as head of strategy and business development, which in some ways is a fantastic transition point, right, for someone coming out of McKinsey. Being in a corporate setting, but you're still doing similar things in terms of managing strategy projects, but also setting the corporate portfolio agenda. So that transition was fantastic. I think being on the other side of the table, working directly with the C-suite, setting the agenda together with the C-suite in terms of what to focus on, and have the internal team to be able to execute it. I think it was a great learning experience. And obviously, coming back to life sciences, Cargill was an amazing place to learn, simply because Cargill is involved in so many touch points on the life science value chain,
Yeah.
isn't it? So you learn everything about not just the raw material, the from the input perspective, but really entire manufacturing process, the value chain, all the way to the consumer end. So it's a fantastic opportunity to be able to, as I said, I mean, standing on a giant's shoulder, given that Cargill is one of the largest sort of privately owned
Yeah.
companies, to see how the world sort of operates, especially in this whole life sciences and ag
Yeah.
space. That was my first Cargill experience, but then I was fortunate then to give the opportunity to lead Cargill Animal Feed business, which you mentioned in the intro. It's a large global business with 250 plants,
Wow.
and that was my first P&L experience.
Ah.
And truly, the learning there, I'll put it simply, is that you learned the most critical thing to be a good leader is not about whether you're smart enough.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not about whether you've got the strategy. The most critical thing about being a leader is, do you have the empathy for your team? Do you have the inspiration for your team? And do you have the self-awareness to know what you need to be for your team? So that's probably my biggest learning especially during my cargo
Yeah,
career.
I think that's a really great learning to share because being in a people leadership position is very, very different to being in something where you're an individual contributor in a particular area, or like you said, you're taking a lead on a strategy, or maybe you're a scientist even. But becoming a true and effective people leader is a very different skill set. And it's great to hear you got the opportunity to do that. And obviously, joining Cargill's was a chance for you to focus in life sciences. What had stood out to you before about the life sciences industry? Why did you enjoy it?
Yeah, I think there's a couple things. I think, compared to the tech industry, where was more of my focus during my McKinsey days, life science by default is simply more dynamic.
Yeah,
Um, you have the uncontrollable aspect of it, right? Because it is life science, it's life. So whether it's the continued development and investment in R&D that continue to challenges how you think about the industry itself, but probably more importantly is we are all sort of beneficiaries of this industry, right? Whether it's life sustaining or life saving. And I think there is that just that personal connection, isn't it? That this is something that I'm not doing just because it's a job,
yeah.
right? But I'm doing it because it's relevant for me and my family and everybody around me. So I think there's just that personal connection that is exciting, right? Not to mention the fast moving nature of the business where you force you to continue to
Yeah,
learn.
and Cargill's must have been incredibly fast moving for you, being in charge of the P&L and 250 sites and thousands of employees. What were some of the learnings for you from a leadership experience? Because all of those employees must have been in different locations, different cultures. What learnings did you take from that time at Cargill's in terms of leading such a vast group?
Yeah, I think that well, there's a couple things. As you said, Katie, I think it was a large group of diverse employee base, which is, by the way, as a comparison, very different from the group of people I used to lead in the strategy team or the group I used to lead at McKinsey, right? Where in some ways people in strategy or in consulting firms are much more
Yeah,
homogenous in terms of their aspirations, in terms of what they want to achieve in life. So I think the biggest learning for any leader, especially in the larger organization with diverse teams, is that you realize, first of all, you have to you learn the ability to connect,
yeah,
because ultimately, it doesn't make sense for a leader to say something about the strategy and the direction you're trying to go, but you lost the entire team simply because people have very different background and experiences and interpretation of what you're saying, right? So for a leader to be able to sort of empathize and translate that message down to every employee, including the shop floor employee who sits in Vietnam, who probably, had a high school education, but understand his or her job is important and how it fit in the broader sort of scheme of things. I think it's actually a leader's job. So I think it comes down to, learning that empathy, learning how to communicate effectively, learning how to translate what is strategy to what's relevant for your individual employees, and continue to sort of encourage and really sort of be the cheerleader for the troop to move along, right, regardless of where they are. I think that's probably some of the biggest learnings of how to be a
yeah.
leader.
I love the cheerleader analogy as well because I think that's something that's so important. That will make a lot of leaders stand out. It will make a good leader become, I'd say, more relatable, like you said, to the people on the ground, right? It's being a cheerleader for them. It's understanding their challenges, how you can help them as well. And everybody, no matter what your job is in a business, will have a different type of responsibility. They'll have different problems they need support on, and being their cheerleader, I think, is super important. So it's lovely to hear that was your kind of focus and your learnings from Cargill's. Where did you go from there? What was the next step? Elanco, I believe.
That's right. I joined Elanco as part of the team that supported the spin-off of the animal health business from Eli Lilly. And it was a tremendous experience because of interesting times in the company where not only we are trying to sort of split it, right? So spin off from Lilly to help build a standalone company, but we're preparing for the IPO and also preparing the strategy in terms of future expansion and growth. So it was a very different experience from Cargill, where you're in, part of this $150 billion company, to a smaller organization where you roll up the sleeves and really be part of the team. So it's a very different experience, and that's what actually interested me at the
Yeah,
time.
I bet. And you obviously spent a good period of time with the team at Elanco. What were the core projects for you? What were your core responsibilities there?
Yeah, I end up sort of being responsible for a couple of things, but I was hired in as president of the U.S. business, and really it was looking at both the U.S. pet business as well as the U.S. what we call production animal business, and it was a sort of great opportunity to really get into sort of the industries and sort of recognizing the similarities and differences of both sides of the business. And ultimately, it really is about how do you make sure that what you offer, right, in terms of products and services and solutions, are truly relevant for your customers, right? Whether ultimately it's to the vets and the pet owners, or it's to the large, the feedlot owners or production animal owners. So it's more of that translation process. What do we do, and how is it relevant? How do you continue to create value? So that's probably the biggest learning and experience, especially trying to do it in a very quick period of time so that the business continue to stabilize and be able to show the investors that this is a company worth investing in. Um, and then the second part of my Elanco journey was interesting because then I transitioned into more of a transformation integration planning role after we announced the acquisition of Bayer Animal Health. And it's a very different role in the sense that it sort of leverages obviously a lot more of my sort of my consulting background, but really looking at it from an enterprise perspective. How do you actually combine two companies? One is Germany based and one is US based. And by the way, we had to do all this in the middle of COVID,
Oh, of
right? So
course. Yeah. Wow.
yeah,
What a challenge.
yeah, it was a very interesting challenge, and ultimately, for people who have gone through these integration, it's when we talk about integration of two companies, it's more than just processes and systems, right? It's people and culture. So we spend a lot of time actually talking about what's the culture similarities and differences of the two companies, and how do we eventually envision, a holistic, integrated company that really, sounds cliche-ish, but take the best of both
Yeah.
worlds. And that's probably where we spend the most time. And it goes back to a little bit of sort of my own leadership learning, right? Ultimately, what really drives or frankly fails a business is people,
Yeah.
right? So how do you, as leaders, spend enough time to really understand, what makes people tick? I think it's probably one of the most critical lessons.
Absolutely. And from a transformation perspective as well, I love what you said is that so many people assume we target processes, process improvement, and how to synergize the two together. But actually, it is the people. And that's the biggest challenge, I think, through any kind of transformation or acquisition or merger or whatever it needs to look like. I think that the people should always be put at the forefront of those discussions. And you're right, it's a complete transformation for everybody involved, isn't it? And obviously that
Absolutely.
probably pulled a lot on your consulting skills and everything you'd learned through all points in your career. So I can totally see why it was a good fit for you. Was it something you enjoyed, tying the two cultures together and creating something new?
It was
Yeah,
highly interesting, because I think oftentimes when people think about culture, people feel this sort of soft and fluffiness of
yeah,
it, right? So it's very amorphous, difficult to get your hands around. But at the end of the day, I think, to me, culture is sort of the values and behaviors, right? That's being manifested in the organization, right? It's the
yeah,
beliefs. Uh, so the question is, how do you dig into these beliefs and say, yeah, we can do this almost scientifically, right? In terms of understanding the similarities and differences, and have systematic way of addressing it,
yeah.
right? So obviously it's, not everything is, there's a more of an art than a science, but it's an opportunity, it's a challenge to tackle. So I enjoyed it. Not everything was perfect, but also learned a lot
Yeah.
from it.
Do you have any advice for anyone who's maybe going through this type of transformation at the moment? Maybe they are part of a larger acquisition that's going on. Would you have any advice for people who are sort of implicated by these changes?
Yeah, I think indeed, right? I think mergers and acquisitions are happening probably even more these days in most of the companies. I think my advice would be the following. We all come into a situation with our own preconceived mindset and behavior, right? And it's human nature, right? We all think that the way we used to do things is better than anybody
Yeah.
else's. Human
Yeah.
nature, right? So I think the biggest opportunity is when you go into any of these kind of merger situations is to how do you come in with a very open mind, right? Use this as an opportunity to make your organization or your environment or your team better, right? So the open mind of asking, how did you do this? Hey, have you thought about this? Hey, help me understand, why you guys do things a certain way, and truly coming with the opportunity of, hey, maybe 1 plus 1 is greater than two. I think is probably the best way to approach it, right? Because so build, well, I might even back up one step before the open mind is that trust,
Yeah.
right? The trust that both sides coming to the table. And when you meet a new colleague from the other side of the table, hey, yeah, despite the fact that, the two different companies might be coming together, hopefully there is a common goal, right? Why this combination creates value. Do people agree with it? So building that trust, having an open mind, knowing that it is not necessarily a zero-sum game, but you can actually get more benefit out of it. I think will make anybody sort of going through that journey also more enjoyable.
Yeah, I think so. I love the open-minded phrase because I think with these changes, a lot of the success will be stemmed from mindset. And it's
Yes.
great advice to always look at this as an open opportunity. Be open-minded about what the future can hold for you and how you can contribute. I think that's really important to remember, to trust everybody, because these acquisitions are made by people who make the decisions that's completely out of your hands. You don't always have a say, right, in what goes on. So you have to be willing to kind of go along with it and take it in and look at it in a positive mindset.
That's right. I think you take it as a learning opportunity as
Yeah.
well, right? I think, you one of the things that I always am very appreciative of my own career is, and especially because of the consulting background, I had the opportunity to observe and see how many different companies operate,
Yeah.
right? And that sort of helped me build up my own knowledge base and experience, right? That drove sort of who I am. So I think, I would encourage everyone, especially in a merger situation, to use it for exactly that purpose
Yeah.
as well. Let me learn about this different company. How do they do it, right? Why do they do it a certain way? What's the benefit of either way? Are there, does it, create a different idea just by because we compare and contrast the different ways of doing things? So the open mindedness, the learning behavior, growth mindset, I think these are all, great mindset to bring to an M&A
Yeah,
situation.
and it's obviously paid off for you because the big projects you've been a part of have been fascinating. What did you go on to do within the wider Bayer Group? Because you obviously took on a leadership role with Bayer after that sort of merger and acquisition was
Yes.
complete. What opportunity did it then give you within Bayer?
Yeah, that's right. So I joined Bayer as the Chief Transformation and Talent Officer, and also became one of the board of management members that really is responsible for leading the entire company. I think the opportunity was unique in the sense that there was a newly created role in terms of transformation. And as you can also hear from my background, I did not have an HR experience, right? So the taking on as head of HR was also an interesting and new
Yeah.
experience. And the reason why I decided to take that role is because it created yet another very interesting challenge. I thought about it quite a bit and then decided that it is true because we talked about transformation and we can talk more about what is transformation. But ultimately, whether you're focusing on transforming a company with a different business model or organization redesign or culture and mindset and behaviors, it all comes down to people, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's like you have to really focusing on people's building their understanding, their capability, and eventually the mindset and the willingness to be on this journey with you. So in other words, I think driving transformation and driving HR at the end of the day, um, there's so much overlap and similarities there, and that's why I think it was actually a very interesting combination. that I end up taking. And my observation is more and more over the last couple of years, you see more and more companies realize the benefit of doing
Yeah.
so. So that transformation is no longer just a standalone function, but really to say, put a focus on it, and the focus is on
Yeah.
people.
And talk to me a little bit about transformation, because this is obviously a topic of real passion for you. Tell us a little bit more
Yeah.
about what transformation of a business really means to you.
Mm. Yeah, indeed, right? I mean, there are many different definitions of what transformation is. I think my definition perhaps is fairly simple. It's to ensure competitiveness, right, of the company in the environment that they're in today and the future. And so I think the whole idea of staying competitive is probably the hardest part for any company, right? Again, of course, and the focus of the time period of both today and the
Yeah.
future. That's what transformation is to
Yeah.
me.
I think it's a crucial point because it's focusing on transforming a business today, so working on the present, but also how is that going to continue to grow and develop in the future too. So I love the fact that you keep it very simple. I think that's really relatable. And for you as well, obviously your background, like you said, you weren't in HR, so you haven't gone up traditionally through the qualifications and through the HR ranks, but clearly from all the experience you've gained, you realize that the people element of the organization is something that is probably the most critical in a business transformation. Would that be fair to say?
Absolutely. I think that's absolutely bar none. In fact, I absolutely appreciative of my HR
Yeah.
experience because I think we realize, the critical role that HR plays really in, not only in really identifying and developing talent, but really reshape, right? What kind of leader do we need for the future, and how do we ensure that, these leaders and, are
Yeah.
trained. And by the way, I mean for a point of clarification, I sort of gave myself the title of Chief Transformation and Talent Officer instead of Transformation and HR Officer, and that was quite deliberate. Right? And the deliberation there is to say, for me, I'm not an HR expert, and thankfully I had a group of fantastic HR experts working with me. So they are the one that can answer all the questions regarding policies and procedures. But rather, my focus is on talent. And talent is not just high potential. And that's what people often think about talent is, you're only talking about whatever the top 10, 15% of folks. I say, no, the truth is, if we are committed to putting people in the right spot, right, where they can truly grow and leverage their skill set for that job that's uniquely sort of suited for them, this person is a talent for the organization. Yeah. Right? Isn't that's the definition of it, ultimately what talent ought to be. And I think that should be every organization's goal to say, we're putting people in the right place, right spot, and helping them develop so they all become talents for us. Yeah. So that's so that's the way that I kind of look at, the role. The focus is not on processes and systems, but really to say, what do we need to do on people so they are all talent for the organization, going back to be able to help the organization be competitive for the future.
Yeah. I really like the fact that you highlight talent is not simply the top 10% of people in one particular skill set, because it's not. I think everybody, particularly in the life sciences industry, everybody is incredibly talented, no matter what your role is, no matter what your specialism is, or your background, your education. But if you can make the most of somebody's talent, so figuring out where they best fit, what they're really good at, I think that, as you said, it can make them a talent. And we often call it someone's superpower. And it's almost trying to figure out like what your superpower is, right? Because not everybody knows exactly the one area that they are the most skilled in. Perhaps they think it's something else. So I'm curious to hear maybe from you, Sarena, like what would you say could help someone to identify what their superpower would be?
Yeah, I think it's a great question, right, Katie? I think it goes back to a little bit of what we also touched on earlier. I think, quote unquote, one superpower can come from multiple different ways. And we also know lots of people who have passion about certain things, which they should continue to develop. The second aspect of, superpower really comes through the continued sort of growth mindset in whatever situation you're in. Make the most out of it. learn about what this unique opportunity brings you, and learn about particular skills and particular sort of aspects of dealing with it that you never done before. Um, and and the three is get feedback. Right? Oftentimes we don't get enough feedback to know how we've been perceived, what are we doing well, and what are things that can be improved. So find a group of people around you. They don't have to be your superior. Right? In fact, your peers are oftentimes the
Yeah.
best to give you the feedback, and just ask them, hey, give me some feedback. How did I do in that last presentation? What would you recommend I do differently, as an
Yeah.
example? So you collect these things that help you self-reflect and help you fine-tune and refine who you want to be. Because ultimately, you will only be good at what you do if you're confident with it, right? And that confidence is a bit of a reiteration, right? It's like you need to do more of it to gain the confidence, and the more confident you are, the more sort of at ease you are in doing what you do. So you want to create a positive cycle, and that's where eventually the more you do, the better you are, right? That's where your superpower start to
Yeah.
develop. So I think that's so I always say don't miss any opportunity, right? Especially the environment you're in, make the most out of it. And I might even lastly say, yeah, I think superpower, I like the phrase as well, but don't get too hung up
Yeah.
on it, right? Because ultimately, I think we will all recognize that especially in today's day and age, we all learn things differently at different time, and there will be different skill sets that will become more important than the others as we go. So part of it is to have that agility, right? To say, I'm learning, I'm relearning, I'm applying things, and I'm refining how I do things. And that, frankly, would be the most important, skill set, yeah, for all of us going
Yeah,
forward.
absolutely. Thank you for sharing that advice. I think that's critical for a lot of us to learn at different stages in our career, no matter where we're up to, no matter what we do. It's that growth mindset, I think, through and through that can really stand you in good stead. For you, obviously joining the Big Bear Group, being part of the board, amazing experience. That's obviously now taken you on to new opportunities as well. So finish up by telling us a little bit about you moving on from Bayer, what you're up to now.
Yeah, I was very fortunate to be asked to join the supervisory board of Siemens Healthineers based in Munich, Germany. And Siemens Healthineers, for many of our listeners in the life sciences, probably are quite familiar with what they do. And it's a great, I think yet another great experience. And being on a supervisory board, be able to, have discussions that provide the future guidance and direction for the organization, continue to help sort of manage and really play up the governance role for this global organization. It's a great learning opportunity to be able to have the kind of opportunity to chat with others. So I'm enjoying that quite a bit. At the same time, I'm also taking the time to have just amazing conversations and different projects to continue to explore, what's there. Because I think, life science is changing
Yeah.
rapidly. And a lot of factors are influencing the shape and trajectory of life sciences. And so to me, it's a rare opportunity for me to have the time to pause and reflect, learning how AI is going to shape us, for
Yeah.
example, and learning how, especially from people and talent management perspective, what's the future of leadership need to look like to be able to lead this environment. So I'm taking a lot of that time to reflect and learn, taking classes, in fact, and then decide what I'm going to do
Yeah,
next.
that's wonderful to hear. You're at this point where you're kind of just exploring, learning, soaking up all the future trends that we're going to see. From a life sciences perspective, are there any particular trends you feel? Obviously, you touched on AI there. Is there anything in particular
Yeah,
that's kind of standing out to you for the evolution of our
yeah,
industry?
yeah. I think we better not underestimate, right, the changes, that where sort of the wave of AI, right, is really impacting life sciences. I would, I can think of sort of three major things, right, that I think is going to come our way. Clearly, AI will change and should shape, right, how life science companies are operating today. Right? Everything from what we all know about productivity gains, right? AI should help us with research and development, right? Should help us with making companies more efficient, should help us in terms of thinking through the manufacturing process better. So there is that fundamental aspect of it. But probably more importantly, right? I mean, going back to the heart and soul of most life science companies, R&D processes, right? How is it going to fundamentally change R&D process? I think that's going to shape that. But I think the second opportunity AI will bring, which we have already seen, right, in the last 2 years, because if you think about biorevolution is really built on this digital understanding, right, or the ability to use digital tools. So, whether it's biotech startups, right, new people coming into the space, I think it's going to, once again, sort of create this renaissance of sort of a flurry of these kind of entrepreneurialism, right, in startups in the life sciences that really leverages digital and technology in a way that traditional companies don't.
Yeah.
I think the third thing, which probably scares me a bit, but probably is also the biggest opportunity, is this is my personal prediction. I think you will start to see more and more new entrants into the healthcare space, right? Because ultimately, the power of AI is in the access to data, okay? And who has access to data? Sometimes it's not the people, not the companies in the life sciences space.
Yeah.
It's technology companies, right? It's the Amazons, Googles of the world. And these companies is going to become more and more relevant, right? When they figure out a way of how to use that data to also to stake out a position in the life sciences space, right? So I think there's going to be these new entrants that's going to come in, together with startups. In other words, I think it's going to, sort of reshape the ecosystem of life sciences. And in other words, big, large, established life science companies, take notice, right? How are you going to reinvent yourself so that you stay relevant when these new entrants come in? I think these are some of the, at least personal observations, some of the trends that I think, we'll continue to see over the next couple of years.
Absolutely. And I think that your point on AI, it's so relevant. It's the hot topic right now. Everyone's talking about how do we use it? Where do we use it? When do we start? And actually, I think we need to start sooner rather than later, right? Because like you said, we're going to have big life sciences companies having competition from a Google or someone like that coming into an industry that they're totally new to. So I think it's great for us to be talking about these trends now, and hopefully we'll start to see, definitely over the coming months, I'm sure
Yeah.
by the sort of middle of 2024, we'll see more organizations talking about this, because it's an exciting time for sure. I know it's a period of change, but those that are thinking of this again with a growth mindset are the ones that I think will adopt this sooner and see the real benefit.
That's right. And I think, to be clear, for many people in the life sciences, many of our listeners know, I'm sure, AI have been applied already many years in the life sciences value chain, right? Whether it's if you think about, sort of the digital imaging, in terms of supporting diagnostics, or, the various sort of applications of AI already in the research process. We know that this is not foreign to many people. But I think, exactly as you said, Katie, I think where we are, though, we're at a bit of an inflection point, right? Where this is no longer just the sort of the pet tool, right, that a couple scientists use in their labs. All of a sudden, this is becoming mainstream. All of a sudden, this acceleration and application is only going to sort of really start upending, how companies organize themselves. And that's where we need to be prepared for.
I think so. Yeah, that's wonderful insight, Sarena. I think you've got a fantastic view on this, and I'm sure for a lot of our listeners, this will resonate quite a lot. One final point that I really wanted to cover with you today, because I know this is something that we've spoken about in the past that feels quite a personal area for you, is we talk about networking. We touched on it right at the beginning when you were at Yale, staying in touch with people in your network and how that can benefit you. Here at Lift Up, we have a lot of women who join us for our live broadcasts, who come on and share their stories on our journey season, but a lot of women who are maybe not so confident networking, maybe not too sure how to navigate it. You've talked to me before about purposeful networking too. I'd love to hear your thoughts on what purposeful networking really is and what women can really get from doing this.
Yeah, no, I think it's a really important point, Katie. Maybe if this is helpful, let me help reframe this. The truth is, when I started my career, I also thought that networking is a dirty word.
Yeah.
It's time consuming. It really, I don't want to go out there and socialize and smooth with people. I don't see the benefit of it. I think over the years, I started to adjust and change my own mindset. And perhaps what's helpful is, instead of thinking about as networking in a traditional sense, think it about as relationship building. Right? And the relationship building, because I think that's also probably more, it's more tailored also for us as women, where we care a lot more about building and connecting with people in an authentic way, right? So building relationships with folks, because there are something in common. It goes back to the purposefulness, right? So, I don't, recommend anybody sort of meeting people. It's really interesting. I was in a conference a couple of years ago. I literally had a woman came up to me, shove a business card into my hand and say, "Nice to meet you," and turn around and walked away, right?
Yeah.
Let me tell you, that's not relationship building, right? Forget about networking. That's not relationship building, right? Relationship building is that, and you pick and choose, right? It's not about quantity, right? It's about quality. Who are the people that just inspire you, or who are people that you find interesting, that you just want to get to know, right? So that there are topics that you want to bring up, to share, or to help them with. So there is genuine interest. I think that has to build on that, rather than just this, blanket, spread my business card networking exercise. Nobody enjoys that, right? So finding your own purpose of why, what interests you. It may or may not, necessarily lead to some very tangible outcome, but I think that's completely secondary, right? Because to me, relationship building enriches our own soul. And that should be the focus, which is like, I'm there because, hey, I really want to get to know this person, or I want to help this person, or there are common topics that we can share. And my gosh, that was just a wonderful conversation. And that's how I would approach this, right? I'm here to find new relationship that I want to nurture because I enjoy it, rather than thinking about it as
Yeah,
networking.
I love the way you reframe it. And I think that actually, us humans, we're designed to connect. It's how we're built, it's how we're raised. We enjoy connecting with each other, we enjoy socializing, whether that's in a professional setting or even in a personal setting. And the
That's exactly
opportunity to
right.
learn from others, I think, is huge. And we set up our Lift Up community about 18 months ago now. And I've not spoken to one person who isn't happy to connect with others. I think everyone has the right intentions, not just women, but also men. We want to learn from each other. We want to create a community. And I think we're very fortunate in life sciences, actually, that we're all a supportive community. As much as we feel competitive sometimes, we all have the same goal. It comes back to your point earlier of why life science for you. We all have a personal impact on this industry. And I think we're very fortunate to be very well connected. But for a lot of women, I think sometimes it is looking at it as something that they're not comfortable with. Networking, as you said, it can feel like a dirty word. It can feel like something that's often quite intimidating now. But I think even from my side and my advice, I would say so many of these networking events now, they can be virtual, and LinkedIn has been brilliant at bringing people together all over the world. So I think we definitely encourage as many people as possible to utilize these platforms, because you don't have to walk into a room full of people and have a coffee and go and shake hands with everybody nowadays. You can find ways of connecting too. Have you seen good stories, and have you had good experiences from virtual networking as well?
I do, Katie. I've been quite fortunate because I've been quite active on LinkedIn, so I do get requests to connect. But one thing I would say, um, going back to building relationship that's meaningful for you and exciting for you is a personal choice. Right? And I think sometimes some people might feel obligated. Oh my gosh, I got to connect with everyone, who sent a request to me on LinkedIn, or when I walked into a conference, I got to get to know everybody. I think I learned, early on that no, I didn't have to do that, right? And so sometimes be a bit selfish. Right? Who are the people that I really want to connect, right? And these are the people you reach out to. These are the people that, in a conference, you go up to them and talk to them because you want to. Because again, I think I would rather have a handful of very deep relationships right, than a lot of shallow relationships on
Yeah.
networks. So be
Yeah.
choosy. I think that's probably the best way to say it. And LinkedIn is indeed a fantastic tool for you to be choosy, right? You can read about a person's background, you understand what this person stands for before you decide whether you want to connect with this person or not. And I think it's perfectly okay, right, for you to be choosy because your time is valuable
Absolutely.
as well. So spend your time
Yeah,
wisely.
that's fantastic. That's a great note to finish on today, Sarena. So thank you so much for giving us your personal insights. It's been a real pleasure to record your career story today. So thank you so much for sharing it with us. We are really, really grateful to have you as part of our Lift Up community as well. And I'm sure I can speak for both of us that for any of our listeners looking for anybody to connect with in the industry, both myself and Sarena would be more than delighted to connect with you and see how we can help.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for having me, Katie. It's been a wonderful
Thank you
conversation.
again for your time, Sarena.